Welcome. My name is Joel Meyer, and I am interested in this forum tonight for a couple of reasons. First of all, a former news director at a radio station in this county, also a former county commissioner who still holds the record for the shortest county commission term in state history, and also someone who's just generally interested in the way of life in Mason County. So welcome to tonight's Candidates Forum, and before we start, there it is, I would like us to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And tonight's forum is sponsored by the North Mason Community Voice, the North Mason Chamber of Commerce, and MasonWebTV.com. Diedrich Allen, the owner and editor of Mason Web TV, is here tonight, and he's streaming the forum live online. And video files will also be posted for later viewing, so you guys can see how you did tonight. That ought to be nice. The purpose of the forum to allow voters to interact with the candidates for the positions that most directly affect North Mason. And that's particularly important this election year because we're electing a new congressional member, a new legislator, and a new commissioner. Actually, 2 races on the county commission level are going on. 3. All 3 contests have a number of candidates, so forums like this will help you select the one that best represents you. So the goal of tonight is civil discourse. We expect everyone to communicate with courtesy and respect. Interruptions, personal attacks, side conversations, or lack of civility will not be tolerated. So the intent of the forum is to give all candidates an equal opportunity to present themselves and their positions, not to support or endorse any candidate or political party. I feel like I'm a teacher here right now in the school. Maybe it's rubbing off. So fundraising on school grounds is prohibited by state law. But as most of you noticed when you came in, there's candidate literature that's on the back table, and we will have time at the end of this forum for folks to be able to socialize, so that ought to be pretty fun. So here are the rules. Approximately 30 minutes has been set aside for each race. That includes a 2-minute opening statement from each candidate and a 1-minute closing statement, and candidates will have 1.5 minutes in which to answer the questions that are put to them. So we'll be presenting both pre-selected questions and questions from the audience. Now, our ushers have been circulating through the audience getting questions, and you can continue, if you have a question as we go along, to raise your hand for particular races. So, ushers, let's see, where are you now? They are, here we go. There's Lee back here, and we will definitely be having more people coming through as it goes along. So if you have a question you'd like to be considered, they'll provide you with a note card. Write your questions on the card and hand it back to the ushers. Now, here are the rules for that. You have to indicate which of the 3 offices the question applies to, and it has to be directed to all candidates for the office, not to a specific candidate. And all candidates for an office will have the chance to answer questions for that office. The questions may be specific, but should be respectful, not combative, and not intended to embarrass any candidate. Now, members of the forum organizing committee will compile questions so we can make sure that we're asking the question that most people ask for. The timer for this evening is Mr. Van Buskirk, and he will have a yellow paddle to show when you have 30 seconds left, and the red paddle to show you're out of time. When I was in wrestling in high school, they also had a towel you'd throw to make sure people knew that you were out of time also. So when that red is shown, you're done. No exceptions. So use your time wisely. The Mason County Auditor, Karen Herr, is here tonight. Here we go. Thank you for being here, Karen. Glad to see you. She's graciously agreed to attend tonight. And she'll be registering voters. So if you have any questions about that, see her here. So we have a very full schedule tonight. So I would like you to hold your applause until the end of the forum and be respectful. So I'd like to introduce the candidates for each race in alphabetical order. There are some that are not here tonight, but those that are, acknowledge, wave, smile, the whole thing. So for the Congressional District number 6, here are the candidates that will be on the ballot. Eric G. Arentz, Jr., Stephen Andrew, Broadhead, Doug Cloud, Bill Driscoll, David Eichner, Derek Kilmer, and Jesse Young. Thank you. For Legislative District 35, State Representative Position 2, there are 2 legislative positions in District 35, and Position 1 has only 2 candidates. So both of those will proceed to the general election. So in Position 2, the candidates are Jeff Davis, Glenn Gaither, Drew McEwen, and Linda Ring Erickson. And for Mason County Commissioner District 1, there are 3 commissioner districts in Mason County, and the top 2 in each district will advance to the general election. So voters in District 1 will be voting for the following candidates only: Travis Couture, Doug Ellingson, Denny Hamilton, and Randy Netherland. Okay, so for Congressional District 6, your microphone is on, and we'll be starting with Mr. Young. The first question was selected by lot from 2 questions provided to the candidates in advance. So here's your first question. You have your opening statement, so I'll leave that to you, and I will...
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. If I can convince you of one thing that you're going to take home with you tonight, and that you'll remember and that you'll hopefully share with your neighbors, is that we cannot allow this race to turn into your traditional Republican versus Democrat type of race. Because I'm convinced that if we don't allow the discussion to move into solutions and a future for our kids, and we just get this dividing line with mud being slung across either side of the aisle, then I think we're going to end up with the same results in Congress, regardless of who wins. And I'm going to submit to you that we can't afford that any longer. Now, if I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to stand and say that we can't let the rhetoric to continue to be the discourse of this race, I think it's incumbent upon me to convince you on the strength of my own endeavor why I might be a good representative for you. And the first thing I'm going to submit is a vision. I think for far too long we've been talking about pork in this district, and we haven't talked about the unique strengths that this district has. Did you know that this district is set apart in terms of opportunity for job growth? And as a vision, and as your congressman, I would work to make sure that the 6th district of Washington State, that's my opponents calling right now because they agree with my position, by the way. This district can, and should be the preeminent leader for job growth in the nation. You're so used to hearing about pork that you've never heard your candidates talk about the fact that this district is bordered on 3 geographic sides by deep water ports. Did you know that? And that those ports are the closest to all Pacific Rim trade routes. This district is also set apart in terms of its richness and abundance of natural resources. Now, if you couple those two and add to it the fact that the seeds for small business growth are already in the ground in this district, we can and should be the preeminent leader for job growth. We just need the right type of leader with the right type of experience to go back and unleash it. And I believe that we need to move away from your traditional candidate, your lobbyist, lawyer, and career politician, and send someone back with the right type of experience in global industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate, David Eichner.
We're at a pivotal moment in history. I think a lot of people realize that. I've been talking to a lot of people this year, and a lot of people are volunteering for the first time. They're going out and getting involved in politics for the first time. We face a debt that is accelerating at a rate that's a geometric explosion at this point. And nations that go bankrupt, the citizens of that nation will suffer really badly if history is any judge. We cannot allow that to happen. We need to get rid of the sacred cows of both parties and address this issue. And I would submit you need statesmen to be able to do that. You need people who have a lot of life experience. You need people that have broad sets of life experience, not just one particular narrow of life experience. I served my country as a submarine officer. I was a Navy nuke. I have shipyard experience on the East Coast, not the West Coast. I went back to school after I served, and I became a CPA. And then I got involved in technology consulting and helped businesses solve problems using a knowledge of both accounting, budgeting, financial statements, forecasting, and combine that with technology. And we can solve amazing things with technology. But I'm not going to tell you I can solve every problem. For me, the issue is the debt. The debt is us bleeding to death on the operating table while the surgeons argue about which piece of shrapnel to take out of the body first. We have to address that debt. And that's why I'm running for Congress.
Thank you. And now Doug Cloud.
Have you ever asked yourself why people are so angry right now? Why they're demonstrating and occupying and protesting around the country? I'll tell you why. My name is Doug Cloud, and I'm running for the 6th Congressional District, and the reason why is because there is a mismatch between what we're told is the truth and what we know is the truth. And that creates anger, and anger creates action, and that's why some of you are here today. You're dissatisfied. You've been lied to. You've been lied to about the premise that the federal government can provide your sustenance, that somehow the federal government can make you happy and allow your dreams to suddenly materialize before you, when in fact that's never been the case in history. Never has a country been in a position to act as a god. It just doesn't work. And so therefore what we need to do is get back to the truth. And the truth is this, that we have to stop a federal government that has been captured by people who want to use it for their own ends. People who will stop at nothing to gain control of the federal government, and will stop at nothing to gain control of your life, and will stop at nothing to steal your ambition, your optimism, and your happiness. And that's why we're here tonight, because we know that something's wrong with our country. And I'm telling you what it is. You've been lied to repeatedly. We're operating on false premises. We're operating on the premise that the United States military can provide military policing for the whole world. That's not going to work. We've been lied to with a deficit that is 43% greater than our revenues. That is not sustainable. But you haven't been lied to about one thing. This is the greatest country in the world. We're going to get it right, but only one way. If we tell the truth to each other and we use the truth to solve our problems. My name is Doug Cloud.
And Doug, go ahead and stay right there, because we're going to go down the table from you on the questions. And the questions that we have here, we have one that we provided you in advance. I flipped a coin and chose one from that. And then we have some other questions from the audience, but you'll have a minute and a half to answer the questions. So here is the question, the first one. The federal government is responsible for national defense, economic stability, and providing an orderly society. What do you consider to be the top priorities of the federal government, and what would you do to ensure those priorities are met?
Well, the top priorities are specified in the Constitution, and that is to provide for the common defense, to establish a post office, to establish a system for maintaining, monitoring, and regulating interstate commerce, to provide courts of bankruptcy, federal courts, and the like. Beyond that, the power is reserved in the states and the people. If it's not specified in the Constitution, that is the historical choice that we made. Now, that choice has been watered down repeatedly as the federal government, even today, has seized more power from the states. And that's really the titanic struggle that we have right here. Do we have control of our lives? Do we have control of our state? Or does the federal government have control? So really, the federal government provides the framework for us to exist under the rule of law, number one. That's the number one priority. We need a civil society based upon lawfully enacted laws that we all agree at some level, well, not all of us, but most of us agree at some level, is the proper mechanism for regulating our conduct. That's really what the federal government is for. It's to provide a system that allows us to operate under the rule of law, not under mob rule.
Thank you. David's next. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I got it.
Excellent. Thank you.
I would agree with Doug that military defense, if you read the Constitution, is the predominant reason why we have a federal government. Our founding fathers were rather nervous of centralized government. They didn't like it. But they realized that if they didn't have something to make sure that a foreign power didn't come in and take them over, and be under the enslaved again by a monarchy, they had to have some way to defend themselves. So defense is absolutely the number one mission of our federal government. Now, we also need a judiciary, and we also need to be able to ensure that the states operate freely in terms of commerce. Because at the time the Constitution was founded, the states were kind of cheating against each other, and they were putting up trade barriers, and they were making it so merchants for one state couldn't come to another state and compete fairly. That's the summation of the Constitution, the reasons for the Constitution. Now, today, even though I don't personally believe that Social Security and Medicare were constitutional, even though the Supreme Court said they were, we made a covenant commitment to our elderly that we would take money from them and we would take care of them in their elder years. We need to honor that covenant. We will honor that covenant. And that's what makes the budget such a difficult thing, is because we have that commitment that we have to meet. We also have defense needs we need to meet. And then we have everything else that we need to talk about.
Okay, Jesse.
Well, I think you will find that between the three of the candidates that had the courage to stand before you today in our race, you'll find that the three of us are of like mind in this regard. We're very constitutionally minded. I know on my signs and my literature we put Constitution first because I believe that you need to derive all of your legislation from that perspective. I mean, the Constitution does give us limits for what the federal government can and should be allowed to do in your personal life. Now, with that, I would piggyback off of what they say, but to some degree, there is more that you need from a congressional representative. The first thing I would say that we need is we need to be effective. You know, there's a truth in life. What gets measured gets done. And I think it's no longer appropriate for us to send candidates back to Washington that stand there and tell you, hey, I am right on the issues. And then sit there and just speak ad hominem about that, never really come and engage you, and just try to convince you why they're right. We need to be right and effective on the issues. Because when you're not effective, you lose things like fiscal responsibility. You get trillions of dollars in debt that we're shackling our kids with. That's why, as your congressman, I've made one pledge. All the other candidates know about it, and they've refused to take it. That pledge is I will come back to every county in this district, there are 6 of them, every quarter, and hold myself publicly accountable before you so that you can hold me accountable. That's true accountability. And what I'll do before each quarter begins is I will list publicly on my website, submit it to the media, the goals that we will achieve that quarter. So you can print those goals off, bring them back, and hold me accountable to those goals. That's being effective.
Okay, hang on to that microphone because the first question's for you here from the audience. So, what are you going to do to support the senior citizens that have paid into Social Security and Medicare their entire lives?
The easiest answer to that is actually bring back jobs to the economy. Are you aware that if we just drop the unemployment level back to 4%, Social Security becomes viable without addressing taxes or the deficit? It becomes viable for another 30 years. If we actually get jobs growing again, Social Security becomes more viable, number one. Number two, I'm going to leverage my experience in the healthcare industry. Are you aware that just right now, notice I'm not talking about tax and spend, which is the traditional rhetoric, because you need effective solutions. From a healthcare perspective, I can tell you this. If you address fraud in that industry, let them go after fraud, and you address tort reform, you could drop the costs of healthcare by 50%. And I'll cite the Washington Policy Center of this state where you can go and get these references from. Now, if you drop the cost of healthcare by 50%, imagine what that does to the certain promises that we've made to you in terms of Medicare and Medicaid. And then all of a sudden we can start talking about balancing the budget and getting the economy going again because two of the big cost drivers of our federal budget are Medicaid and Medicare. But see, when you send someone back that's your traditional candidate that has to talk from a script that was given to them by some consultant, they can't talk to you articulately about the adjudication processes that healthcare industry goes through. You send someone back with practical experience, and we can be effective for you day one.
Thank you. Same question.
I think that part of the reason why I'm so focused on the debt is that governments typically in history solve debt problems through inflation. And we're not talking little 3-4% inflation. We're talking 10, 20, 100% inflation. And anybody that's on a fixed income will find that that amount, or the hundreds of thousands of dollars you saved in your 401k, will be able to buy you a cup of coffee. That's the danger of this debt. This explosion of debt is going to be solved in a way that is really going to hurt the elderly. And you and I know the government statistics are constantly being redefined in whatever way suits the government so that they can say, oh, there's not so much inflation. But yet, it costs so much more to live. And you don't get an adjustment because the government says, well, CPI didn't go up that much. That's the danger. If we get into high rates of inflation, we have to address this debt. Because if we don't, it won't matter whether you still have Social Security or not. It won't be able to buy you anything. It's crucial that we stop the bleeding. We get the patient stabilized. It's basic triage.
Thank you. And Doug.
Well, of all the social welfare programs, Social Security is the one that should be prioritized, in my opinion, because it can be made actuarially sound. At some point, in any kind of insurance fund or pseudo-insurance fund, there has to be a match between benefits received and receipts received by the government. So that's really the truth. We have to balance those two, and there's a number of ways that can be done. Now, in regards to Medicare, the problem in Medicare is the federal government fixes prices of healthcare services that they'll pay for, and that doesn't do anything to ensure competition. Competition will reduce healthcare costs. We've seen that in LASIK eye surgery, which is not covered by the government, which is not typically covered by insurance companies. And now you can get LASIK eye surgery for about 8% or less of what the original price was. We never see that in our healthcare system at all because the government fixes prices. We have to get them out of there. In that regard, there has to be more competition. Finally, there's been too many people using the Medicare system as a piggy bank. Too many areas of the healthcare industry go to their congressman and say, we need a raise, here's some campaign contributions, give us a fixed price so we make more money. Again, we need to introduce free market processes into Medicare and Medicaid. Competition.
Okay, stay right there because we're in the closing statement situation here. You have 60 seconds, the elevator speech, as a closing statement.
Well, no person in this room will ever agree completely with me. I know that because I've talked to many people through the years, and not one has completely agreed with me. But if we use the truth individually, collectively, to get at the problems, if we really use the truth instead of PR machines, propaganda, and falsehoods, we can solve our problems. We will. In any family, in any organization, if there's fair debate and an emphasis on accuracy, the truth, and common values, you can resolve problems. If you're going to lie to each other, you're going to cheat and you're going to steal, which is what we're contending with right now in our society, and that's why we're so angry, then we're not going to solve our problems. So that's really the answer. We'll solve our problems with the truth. And I would submit to you that I'm the man most prepared to deal with the difficult choices that face us today. My name's Doug Cloud.
I'm going to get off the debt topic because I think you know where I stand on that. I think as Americans, we want fairness. We want basically to be left alone most of the time. We want our government to not cheat our currency so things keep getting more expensive and our wages don't keep up. And banks that get their hands on that money that's being printed first take all the benefit of it. That's not fair. And as Americans, we instinctually know that. Wow, that came fast. I want us to return to being a country. That vision that Jesse talked about, my vision is a vision that came from our founding fathers. A vision of peace. A vision of commerce. A vision of limited government that for the most part left you alone as long as you weren't hurting other people. That's what we were. We need to get back to that. That's what works for countries.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
Jobs of the 21st century. You know, I led with the vision, and I'll tell it to you again. This district can and should be the preeminent leader for job growth in the nation. And you're probably not used to thinking about that. But let me tell you why that's so vitally important to me. I have 5 children now, 9 years of age and under. Just over 30-some years ago, I grew up homeless and impoverished in the hilltop area of Tacoma. And through a lot of providence, I was able to rise up out of that. And here's what bothers me every night before I go to bed. What if on the way home tonight I was in a car accident and I was removed from the picture? What if my kids were removed out from underneath my provision? Would they still have the same opportunity if they were stuck back in Hilltop to rise up out of it the way that I did just 30-some years ago? I'm running because I believe I have the right experience to bring jobs of the 21st century so that you, your kids, your grandkids, and my kids can all have opportunities for those jobs.
Thank you. So I forgot a very important topic before we started tonight's meeting, the comfort stations. The men's restroom is in the corner right over there. And the women's, well, it says girls on it, right? Boys over there. And the women's restroom is over through the door and to the right. And Dave, I worked at a radio station. 60 seconds was about the time you had to do that. So it's a lot of time. So now let's go to Legislative District 35, Position 2. We'll do the same thing, and we'll start with Mr. Gaither here. And you will have 2 minutes to make your presentation as we go down the line this way. Thank you.
My name is Glenn Gaither. I've been living in Mason County now for close to 13 years. By trade, I'm a corrections officer and a firearms instructor. So for me, public safety is a great concern. I'm also a husband and a father of 4 small children and 2 large, 2 out of the nest, and we're still working on the 4. My greatest concern right now is for our economic situation. We hear a lot of people talking about the unemployment rate in the state and in the country, and you hear numbers coming out, they're like 8, 9%, and things are getting better because, well, look, the job numbers are up. But it's not just job numbers. My biggest concern is the lack or the loss of the quality of life that we've had in this state in the last 3 years. A lot of people are still at their job making the same wage. A lot of people have taken pay cuts. And there are others that have had to take a second job, or families where mom wanted to stay home, they'd have to go back into work. We're not doing better. The cost of living is racing away from us. Fuel, energy, your grocery bills, everything that we need to run our daily lives is quickly outpacing our incomes. In my case, I'm a state employee. We took a 3% pay cut. But if you look at the cost increases to medical care, it's more like 15%. So as a nation, I'm saying, and as a state, we're not doing better as far as our quality of life. We need to get people back to work, not in just minimum wage jobs, but in jobs that can support families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Drew McEwen.
Well, good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. It's great to see our system at work. My name is Drew McEwen. I'm running to be your state representative in the 35th District, Position 2, and I'd appreciate your support and your vote. I'll just give you my background. I moved out here in 1994, courtesy of the U.S. Navy. I was in the nuclear propulsion program and served on the submarines, USS Nevada and USS Florida out of Bangor. When I got out of the Navy, I entered, my uncle recruited me into the investment field, and so I was doing that for a few years, figured I knew enough, what could possibly go wrong, so I resigned and started my own company. Well, that was late August of 2001. Couldn't have been worse. We all know what happened in 9/11, the tragedy that struck this country. But I dug deep from the lessons I learned in the Navy and from growing up, and how I got through that and how I made my company survive was taking a factory job, working at 10 at night to 6 in the morning. I'd get done, ride my bike to my office, sleep on the floor for 2 hours, and then hit the phone and make it work for the day. And when my kids would get out of school, I'd pick them up, go home, take a nap. They were still young. They were still into that. So go back and do the routine over. And those first 6 months It's why my company is still in business today 11 years later, and I will never forget those lessons. This is America. We can pull up from this. Times are tough, and we need to get government out of the way. Whatever it is you want to accomplish, if you want to climb the corporate ladder, start your own business, work your job, and just do better, we can do it. And we have three things before us that are paramount right now. We need to improve the job market and the economy, reduce the regulatory environment so our businesses can grow and hire more people. That solves a lot of our budgets. Education, 59 cents out of every dollar makes it to the classroom right now. That figure is way too low. We need to increase that, fully fund education first and properly, and finally reform state government. We should only be involved in the essential services, which are education, public safety, and protecting the vulnerable. Everything else comes after that. Thank you.
And Linda Ring Erickson.
Good evening. I'm Linda Ring Erickson, and I want to start by thanking our sponsors. This is a great turnout tonight, and we appreciate seeing you all here because all the candidates are working really hard, and it makes a difference when you think somebody's listening. I'm running for the vacant position in the 35th District, and I think that this campaign in the 35th District is about jobs, about our natural environment, and about transportation. Some of you have already heard me say that this campaign is about jobs, jobs, and jobs. It's about the jobs we have now and how we keep them. It is about the jobs, the good jobs that we would like to attract here, and the good jobs and companies that start here that want to make an investment in our community and not just take a short-term profit and leave us with a mess. And it is about the jobs of the future. And we need to understand the marketplace of the future so that we can offer an excellent K-12 education as well as make sure that our technical colleges and our four-year universities offer the kind of training so that the employers of the future say, I don't care about anything else. I want to go there because their job force is so good. The campaign is also about natural resources. Many of you know that the natural resource economy here has been our backbone for 150 years. We need common sense approaches to protecting our environment that allow our natural resource industries to continue. And it's about transportation, and hopefully we'll get to talk about that later on in the campaign because that's about a 100-hour conversation. We need more transportation to be a viable part of our state industry. We're going to have a lot of other issues coming up during the campaign. The state has a lot of problems to solve, and new things will come up during the next 2 years. However, I will tell you that I will study the issues, I will listen to the people in this district, I will work very hard. This will be my only job, and the 35th District will be my only special interest. Thank you.
Okay. After you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Davis, and I as well am running for the same position these other three fine candidates are running for. But listen, we've all heard the same dialogue tonight. So what makes me different? That's the question that I need to answer for you. Well, first off, I am a father. I'm a proud father of 3 kids, school-aged children. I'm a son or a product of a retired school teacher that taught English for 36 years. But on top of that, I go to work, and I work hard. I put a hard hat on, and I go to work just about every night. In fact, when I leave here, I'm going to go to work. And just like many of you, we all struggle. We're all trying to figure out how we're going to make this work, how we're going to advance this country forward again. Now, jobs has been the theme here, and everybody's right. Jobs is the theme. So the question is how do we do it? And I've talked to some people before this. How do we make that happen? Currently, I'm a port commissioner at the Port of Olympia, and it's a little bit different than Mason County because we have one port district for all of Thurston County. Before I came here tonight, folks, I sat in the EDC, the Economic Development Council, and one of the things that I've been passionate about for the last 3 years on that committee is bringing jobs into Thurston County, bringing jobs into this state. I believe I'm the only candidate as a port commissioner and as somebody who sits on the Economic Development Council and the Chamber for Thurston County that has experience in that. We've seen that happen. We've had successes as far as bringing jobs in Thurston County. And the same paradigm by which we're working down there, we can institute that up here in Mason County as well. Now, the unemployment rate down in Thurston County is 7.3. In Kitsap County, it's 7.6. And in Mason County, it's 10.6. It's a lot higher here. We We have to look at the natural resources we have. We have to look at all the things we have available to us and make sure that we use those to our advantages. And I'll wrap that up at the end, but real quickly, transportation is a big issue. And it doesn't take 100 hours. You know what? We need a road through here. We need a road south of here. We need to have people to move freight cargo through here, because if we don't, we're not going to have the type of jobs in this area that we're going to be needing in the future.
Stay right there.
Thank you.
We're going to start from this end. So the randomly chosen question for you: do you believe the Growth Management Act is effective, and what would you do to improve its workability?
The Growth Management Act is 20 years old, and just by way of example, I was a planning commissioner down in Cowlitz County, which is down out of Longview. We were one of 4 counties in the state, that didn't have the GMA. So we were running the way things were in the past. Now, the GMA has a lot of good attributes to it, but again, it's 20 years old, and the concept, although it looks good on paper, the reality of it is we need to look at that again. We need to pick up that document, address the issues that work, and address the issues that don't work. And this is something that has to be done at the legislative level. You know, the committee that looks over the current laws on that, they've set some precedent out there which have been, well, they haven't worked. It's that simple. So there's nothing wrong with that. It was a great document at its time with a lot of great ideas. It just hasn't worked all that great in some certain areas. Not everybody can live in the city, and certainly not in North Mason County, not everybody can live in this city. So let's address that again. Let's pick that document up, look it over a little bit, and see what needs to be revamped on that.
Okay. Linda Ring Erickson, same question.
The Growth Management Act was a bipartisan bill, and in reality, I don't think it has ever fulfilled the legislative intent. I was actually working for a different county when it was passed, and the legislative intent talked about how it would allow local governments to kind of pick their footprint. Kitsap County and Thurston County were of a size that they were originally in the bill, and Mason County opted in, again with bipartisan leadership, thinking that at that time, since we had no zoning at all, that it would help assist us moving towards the future and actually become more attractive to business. There are a couple areas that I know have been attempted to be revisited a number of times, and I would be part of the group that I hope would do that. I think 20 years is a good time to review the progress and maybe look at the entire document. But the Growth Management Hearings Board was intended to be a review to see if the intent of the local plan was being implemented. In fact, it's become something quite different, and I think that many counties, cities too, have spent millions of dollars appealing decisions that didn't really work for their community and actually were working contrary to the community. And frankly, Mason County is one of those counties. I know Thurston County has suffered similar issues with water adequacy, so we really need to look at that. The other piece has to do with anybody can file a case in growth management. Everybody has standing, so they don't have to live in the county, they don't have to own property in the county, and they don't have to have any vested interest. And I think we need to revisit that as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McEwen.
Well, we got a lot of regulations, don't we? Shoreline management, sewer, growth management, and it is old. And I think there's 2 inherent flaws in it. One, there's 14 points to the Growth Management Act with none of those 14 points having more weight than the other. You can go before a review board and think you've met maybe 10 out of 14, but they think those other 4 were more important than the 10 you did meet, and you lose. I think that's wrong. We need to define where the priorities are, what's most important, so that developers can plan and we can have affordable housing. Mason County has 60% roughly of Mason County is water. We got enough restrictions when it comes to building. The other key factor for the Growth Management Act is local control, which I believe that whether it's the school district or growth management, we know best what's for our communities, don't we? And I don't think it's fair that we have review boards that aren't necessarily comprised of the people in the communities they live in, and that needs to change. Whether those people are elected or appointed at the local level, that's a discussion we can certainly have, but I think we need to have local review when it comes to growth management hearings.
Thank you. Mr. Gaither.
It's a long walk around if you're running for state rep. If you're a congressman, you're right up here on the easy end. So the Growth Management Act, which started out in 1990, had like 13 objectives, right? So part of that was supposed to be public spaces. Some of it was supposed to be environmental, economic. They're looking at recreation, building permits, and a host of other things. And when they wrote this thing, their objective was that every one of these things was going to be equal all the way across the top. But what I think has happened in the past 20 years is it's gotten a bit out of balance. Instead of having all these things on a level playing field, economics down here in the bottom, and environmentalism's up here on the top. Now, everybody in this room, and myself included, is all for clean air and water. But it has to be a balanced and managed act. So my recommendation would be to have a complete audit of GMA done by the state auditor's office to see where it's really working and where it's not working, and to see whether or not it's even cost effective. And I can see he's getting ready to hold up the 30-second time. There, 30 seconds, great. So anyways, I'd like to thank all the Navy guys in here, because without those guys, Marine Corps couldn't get to the job site. So again, my name's Glenn Gaither.
Stay right there, because you get the next question.
Almost made it all the way around.
You don't have to take that long walk. We'll save you a little bit.
Eichner. I could switch signs with McEwen, and no one could tell the difference. My head's shinier.
Hey, buddy. Okay, shocked I am that this question would come up at this forum. What will you do to help bypass the reality?
Ooh, the infamous Belfair bypass question. This thing's been a topic of discussion since 1965. So we've spent 50 years, tens of millions of dollars doing different studies, environmental impact studies, and looking at this thing in 1,000 different ways. You know, right now, I believe they're working on actually widening the roads in Belfair, making the flow of congestion smoother through town, and that's a real good and feasible plan. But we're in a position right now in the state where revenues are way down, and fuel or revenues from gasoline or our transportation revenues are also down. The reason is because they pushed and pushed and pushed to put people in more fuel-efficient vehicles, right? So now we're buying fewer gallons of gas. Those revenues have dropped. So we have to come up with a different means of providing those revenues. The best way to do that is to work on strengthening our economy. We had a budget surplus, and the reason we had that budget surplus because everybody was working. Everybody was doing well. The revenues were there. Okay? Now what we're doing is we're trying to create newer taxes, more taxes, newer and increased fees, and that's not really going to work for us because it's going to choke out the economy.
And we've had a request from audio-visual. If we can keep our animal pacing within, what about right here? Like that? How's that? Okay, Ace, thank you. Just follow the marks.
We'll get you a wide lens next time. So where were we? Belfair bypass. Yeah, I remember moving out here in 1994 and hearing about this Belfair bypass thing, and didn't understand what it was about until one weekend a bunch of Navy guys and I decided to go to the state park down on 106, and we found out why we need a Belfair bypass on a Friday afternoon. It is important, and it's been studied to death, and it takes leadership. We've spent enough money studying it. It's time to do it. And the leadership to do it, we've had a failure to govern in this state, plain and simple. When we've had 6 special sessions in the last 2 years, you think the Belfair bypass is anywhere on the priority list? So we need to change the culture in Olympia and show some leadership and get this done and move it forward. And we need to bring some of the players at the state level here and let them see what's going on so they understand it. Sending our senator and 2 representatives to talk about it isn't going to get it done. So we need to show some leadership, get other people involved, and make sure the DOT is prioritized.
Well, this is that piece of puzzle that I wanted to talk a little bit more, which is I think that the 35th District particularly has not gotten its fair share of the transportation dollars. I guess you could say for 50 years. I think, frankly, Glenn, it's been going on since about 1950. Maybe it's closer to 100 years. There was a time when we were the top economic driver of the state. We had the highest per capita income in the state. We had the highest number of PhDs in the state. But right now we really can't attract business. We can't attract industry because you can't get the raw materials in, and you can't depend on getting the finished product out. And there's a good chance you can't depend on your employees getting to work on time. The reality is the Belfair bypass is probably the number one on the list for infrastructure in terms of rural projects. We have not enough money at this point in the state to back all the projects that are on the list, and we have worked hard for the last 7 years to keep this project alive. There will be some funding going in this year to complete the environmental impact statements, and as well as probably enough money to begin the acquisition of property. But there isn't enough money, and we do need to look at new structures and new thoughts about how we're going to fund transportation into the future. The good news is that the funding for the improvements of SR3 through Belfair are fully funded at this time, although I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff.
I'll answer this one. For the last 8 years, I've been working on freight mobility throughout the state of Washington, even in the United States, working on train issues, working on rail issues, working on highway issues. Currently, the United States is ranked 22 in the world as far as transportation infrastructure. That's got to change. Here's the fact. Every single one person in this room that goes to the store and buys something has paid for a big tunnel over in King County. All right? That money needs to be here. Let's be honest, it's not just for Mason County, it's not just for Kitsap County, it's for the whole peninsula. There's more of a return on the investment for investing in transportation infrastructure in Mason County, in Kitsap County, than there ever will be for digging a hole over there in King County. It's got to take somebody that's going to go to Olympia and say, this is a priority for the state, not just for the 35th district, but for the 22nd, 24th, all the way up throughout the peninsula. Because if we don't have the transportation infrastructure in place like we need, and we don't have the congestion that we have over here and down in Shelton, no business is going to want to come in here because they're going to look at that and say, how are we going to get a truck through there? Or how are we going to get more people through there that's going to be coming into the area and hopefully enjoying it? I know my way around the halls in Olympia, specifically on transportation issues. And so when I talk about money being taken out of our community and shipped over to King County, know this. I'm going to go to Olympia and say, wait a minute. This is beneficial for the state, and the return on the investment that's going to happen in the 35th district is going to benefit everybody in the state, not just King County.
Okay, so the last question from the audience. What is your position on charter schools?
Well, I got to go back in something I said originally. My mother is a retired school teacher of 36 years. I have 5 school teachers in my immediate family. In my opinion, charter schools imply that our current school system is broken, and I don't believe that it is. There's some things that we need to have addressed in our current school system, but having a charter school isn't, in my mind, the answer. So here's the thing is the way I look at it. Do we pay for somebody to come in and put a school in of which we don't have any control over? All of you have the ability to be a part of a PTA, a Parent-Teacher Association. All of you have the ability to go into that school and say, you know what, I don't like what's happening here. I don't like the way the education is happening. And with a charter school, you've given up that right. So here's the question. Are you going to have your tax dollars go to a charter school to where you have absolutely no control over the way your kids are educated? Or are you going to keep that money in the private sector and say, I can do something about this? And this is what, hopefully, activism within your community is all about. I'm not in favor of charter schools, and I would vote against it.
Linda.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, what is your position on charter schools?
I'm opposed to charter schools. I think that we had the best education system in the world in the mid-50s. And at that time, the United States had the best education. We had the best education system in the nation, and our nation's education system was the best one in the world. And we've seen that continuously eroded. And, you know, where somebody wants to send their children to a private school, I think that's a personal family decision. But I think that if we want to be the society that we say we want to be, we need to have exceptional public schools. And one of my commitments going to Olympia will be to work very hard to ensure funding. Many of you are aware there's been a recent state Supreme Court finding, McClary versus the state of Washington. It came out of Federal Way, not the city of McClary. But it had to do with making sure that the schools provided, or that the state provided an ample, stable source of funding for the educational system. I believe that as a legislator, it would be one of my top priorities to work on finding a way to develop a dedicated source of funding so that we can make sure that our education system carries us through into the future. Thank you.
Well, according to the Policy Institute of Washington, 60% of our college freshmen in this state have to take remedial math and English to get up to speed for college-level work. So I submit we got some issues. And to dismiss something out of hand without any discussion of it is irresponsible. So, are there issues with charter schools? There are pros, certainly, to it. It's proven in states that have them. On the other hand, we can't just put a charter school system into place that jeopardizes the local schools. We need to find that balance. And I think we need to have that discussion because it's the responsible thing to do. This isn't a slam on our current teachers. We have wonderful teachers. My kids are in the Shelton Public School. And they've had some tremendous teachers that I have a lot of respect for, that have made a positive impact on my son's lives. So, but we do have issues that we need to address. We need to have the discussion, and we need to find the solution. And if we can look over to across the water, and there's an aviation high school, it's not a charter school. It's done within the public school system. I kind of look at that as a hybrid. And maybe we need to look at stuff along those lines and find those right solutions. So just to dismiss it out of hand, I think is the wrong track to take. Let's have the discussion, but let's make sure we don't jeopardize our local schools.
I hope those county commissioners have to walk all the way around. So, not that end. Charter schools, yes, no, maybe, who knows? You know, what I'd like to have as many options out there available for our children as humanly possible. In our house, we homeschool, okay, but there are resources that we use from the state to do that. That way we can have them tested to make sure that they're staying at a certain level. This fall they're going to be going to Mason County Christian School. We chose that. So what I like to see is the parents and the adults out there making the decisions for our children to actually have some options. You know, one thing that a lot of people talk about is funding the child. And they're like, well, what does that mean? You know, on average, this state spends about $10,300 per student per year for K through 12 education. How would it be if instead you got a voucher or a check that year, and you as a citizen and as a parent got to actually pick the school that your child went to? Maybe you don't like a particular school because they're having issues at that school. Maybe you don't like the teachers in that school. Maybe there's other issues, you know, transportation issues, and you want to pick your school for your children. You should have the greatest amount of say in the education that your child gets. There have been independent studies done also where the actual graduation rate in 2008, I believe, was only like 64%. Now they're saying it's somewhere up around 72%, but that's still not a really good graduation rate. When I graduated from high school, which was back in 1979, just a couple of years ago, we graduated 95% of the students in the class and only spent about 15% of the state budget on education.
Okay. So you have your 60-second summation.
Okay, my name, again, is Glenn Gaither. I've got to stay between the lines. I'm a pacer. I do that at work a lot. There's a lot of ground. I'm an independent candidate, and a lot of people ask me, well, hey, why don't you pick a side? You could be a conservative Democrat. And I was like, I never heard of that. Or you could be a liberal Republican. And I was like, I haven't heard of that either. But I did pick a side, and the side that I chose was of the citizens in the district and in the state. I don't think that what we have going on in Olympia right now is always the most effective government. We have two sides battling each other, opening up their guns, and they go at it over and over and over again. This last legislative session that we had in Olympia, we knew that we were going into session without a budget. We knew that the economy was in the tank, but instead they decided to focus on social issues and go into a special session and make the very last day of that session the day that they came up with a budget. The budget comes first.
Drew.
Well, again, thank you for coming tonight. Certainly appreciate it and the opportunity to be here. Again, my name is Drew McEwen. Want to be your representative in Olympia. I'm going to keep my business going. And here's why. Because it's the way our founding fathers intended it. You went and served the people you represent, and you go back to the life that you had, and you keep it going in the meantime. And the key factor in there is that every vote I take down there, as an employer, I've got to live with the consequences. And I don't think a lot of people in Olympia get that. They don't get the postcard in the mail last fall that said the workers' comp is going up 2.4% again. They don't understand the challenges we face, the regulatory burden, and then they wonder why aren't we hiring more people. We need to change the culture. We need to have leadership. I will take the values and the lessons I learned in my time in the Navy and in growing a business for the last 11 years and apply those in Olympia. We will show new leadership, and we can move this state forward, and together we can make it morning again in America. Thank you.
No, you didn't know there was a PE element to this.
No, I didn't. It's
in the PE room.
It's part of the Mason County Health Challenge. Do it with as little cost as possible. I am Linda Ring Erickson, and I am running in the 35th District. I grew up in the 35th District, and my parents grew up in the 35th District. But my daughter didn't get to grow up in the 35th District because I couldn't find a job and I couldn't complete my education here. Now, we all know that some of our children will always leave, but we want our children to be able to opt to stay here and have good jobs and a good education and invest in our future, as well as to attract new people for the future. I've enjoyed returning to this community and serving it for the last 7.5 years as a county commissioner. I think I've learned a little bit about local government. I had worked for cities previously. I would take that experience to the legislature and help make government work better together. Lots of times things happen at the state level that create barriers for local government and don't really, excuse the pun, pave the way for all of us to succeed. As a legislator, I would work hard to ensure that we make good decisions about how we work together. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff.
So there's two things I want to hit on in 60 seconds. The first one is this. There was a study that came out in Forbes magazine just this last week that said the United States is ranked 7th in the nation as far as being friendly to business. What that didn't say is that's for big businesses. It's not for small businesses. As a small business owner myself, there's improvements that we can make in the state of Washington to help that. And I've had experience with this as a port commissioner and economic development counselor director down in Thurston County. I understand that. I sympathize with that. But to know me is to know this in summation. If elected, I'm going to go to Olympia, and every bill or piece of legislation that comes before me, I'm going to ask one question. Does this help or hurt the American taxpayer? Does this help or hurt the American worker? What are we doing to improve ourselves, and what can I do to do that to make it better for all of us? You know, I'm not going to wrap myself in an American flag, but we have to bring this country back. We have to do the things that we can to help all of us, because if we don't, we're going down a path that I fear for my children. I'm Jeff Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Now, I promised the folks here from the 1st District that are running for office I had a special treat for them, and it's a bit of advice. When I was appointed as county commissioner for 2.5 months to fill an unexpired term, I was told I'd be serving two positions. One is the county commissioner, and one is a member of the Board of Health. Now, the lesson I learned was, when they give you this hat, do not put it on. Let's just say front page was pretty big that week. So, thank you, smile, and put it in your pocket. So, Travis, you have 2 minutes for your presentation.
Hi, I'm Travis Couture. I'm running for Mason County Commissioner Position 1. I live in Belfair with my wife Rachel, and I also live in the Phase 2 area of the sewer project. What does that mean? That means that our property rights are being taken away as we speak. Okay, this is not This is a big issue. Our property rights were an unalienable right given to us by our Creator through the Constitution. It is the Fifth Amendment that secures our right to our property. And so what? They're going to build a sewer. The sewer might be great, but guess what? At what cost? Over $50 million for 200 hookups? Yes, some of it was paid for by grants, but the rest of it will be paid for by us. $25,000, $4,000 to hook up, $7,000 grinder pump. We're all on fixed incomes now. This is a bad economy. We don't have jobs. A lot of people like to say it could be around 10 to 12% unemployment in Mason County. Well, guess what? That doesn't factor in the fact that the people that have already dropped out of the workforce. It could be functionally 20% unemployment. Now, sometimes the county commissioner's hands are tied. We're handcuffed by the state legislature and people at the state level, which means that we're handcuffed by people from King County who want to pass things like Growth Management Act and destroy our rural community. One-size-fits-all central planning does not work. It is proven. It does not work, and we have to stop it. It's incumbent upon us to stand up for our rights, or we will lose them, and they won't come back. I'm 24 years old. I jumped into this race at 24 years old. What other 24-year-olds jumped into this race?
Thank you, Travis.
I care about my rights, and thank you.
Doug Ellingson.
Hi, my name is Doug Ellingson. I'm running for Commissioner in District 1. I live in Allen. I've been there for 16 years. I've also been an employee of Mason County Public Works for 16 years and think that I know what's happening in Mason County. I've watched 8 separate sets of commissioners go through in 16 years and seen what's happened. I think that with my background, the fact that I know every elected official, I know almost every department head by name, makes it pretty easy for me to walk in there and hit the ground running. Thank you.
Hamilton.
Good evening, North Mason. It's great to see this crowd here. I'm glad you all took the time to come out and listen to us. My name is Denny Hamilton. I'm running, like the other fellows here, for Commissioner in District 1. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a Washingtonian by birth. I was raised on a small farm near Falls City. I went to high school at Mount Si High School. I graduated and became a logger for a couple years as a high lead logger with Weyerhaeuser and Scott Paper. I went to Alaska and did some commercial fishing. I went to school at Central Washington University, and then I went to graduate school in Pennsylvania at Westchester University. When I got out of the education game, I got into the Peace Corps, and I spent a couple years in Southern Africa. That was kind of a door-opening experience for me because it led to a career in international work that lasted more than 30 years. I moved to Mason County in 1995, but I started coming here in 1962 because I have a good friend who lived here, and his parents had a restaurant down on the canal, and so I started coming down here, so I'm very familiar with Mason County. Last year I decided that I was going to stop doing the international work and start to do a focus here in Mason County. I think that county government can be improved. I think I'm the guy that can help improve it. I bring a world of experience to this job. I'm a husband, a father, a son, a grandfather, an optimist, and I think that we can make a better county. Thank you.
And Randy Netherland.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to my home. Unlike everybody else, I'm actually from Belfair. This is my gym. This was my high school gym. That was my locker rooms over there. I gave my very first public speech in this room. I was absolutely terrified, just like I am now. This is a true story. I'm sitting there speaking, and I'm talking to a room full of kids, and I heard a noise that I couldn't understand. It just kept sounding like that. And I was trying to figure out what could it be. I'm not kidding you when I tell you I found out. It was my knees knocking. They actually do make a noise when your knees knock. I was that terrified. But the point I'm trying to make is I am from North Mason. I am from Belfair. I actually know the issues that we deal with because I've been living them forever here. Experience matters. You can't just start and put in 10 months and say, I know what's going on in the area. You can't put in a few months and say, I know what's going on in the area. You can't just do it from the government side. In order to be invested in your community, you've got to be active in your community. And experience does matter. You're looking at a gentleman who's tried to give a lot of his life to his community. What I did is I ran here as the ASB president 31 years ago and was selected. When I was standing up there in front, I actually can still remember I introduced myself as Randy Netherland, the fighter. Well, 31 years later, I'm still fighting for you. I am the chair of the Planning Commission. I'm on the board of directors for the Economic Development Council. I'm your port commissioner. I serve on the board of directors for Habitat for Humanity. I am on the Government Affairs Committee for the Chamber of Commerce. I was an original member and the original chair for the North Mason Community Voice. Thank you very much.
Okay, stay right there. Because you got the first question here. The county is responsible for implementing state law and policy. What do you consider to be the top priorities of the county government, and what would you do to ensure those priorities are met?
Top priorities of government, of course, is going to be realistic regulation. It's going to be bringing in infrastructure in ways for the things that we can't afford to do for ourselves. It is going to be, most importantly, also the protection of our people, the protection of our community. You see everything that's been going on right now. It's been out of control. Here recently, I got a phone call, or actually a text message in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning. A friend of mine is living down Mission Creek. His wife's going to be giving birth any day, and they're out there doing Bernies, and they're out there making a bunch of noise and partying, and we can't get a police officer out there. Down here at our gang, we have a gentleman, I always knew him as Uncle Ron. He's not my uncle, but we all just call him Uncle Ron. He's got MS. He's in a wheelchair. They're out there. There's a guy out there harassing the customers, threatening to hurt everybody. And here's Uncle Ron because he can't get a police officer down there, out there in his wheelchair with a bat to scare him off. We need to have enough protection on the streets to back up our own officers. If we can't give them the protection they need, how do we expect to let them protect us? Now, when it comes to representing government, you got to be able to represent the people first and foremost. You need to have a group of citizens together where they can have an appeals committee, where they can have direct input on what's going to happen when the county gets out of control. If you ask somebody to stand and they don't want to stand, what you get is a lie. If you ask somebody to stand and they don't know what they're doing, what you get is a lie. No more lies. Let's get somebody who knows what they're doing, and let's actually stand.
Okay.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, I would love to. The county is responsible for implementing state law and policy. What do you consider to be the top priorities of the county government, and what would you do to ensure those priorities are met?
Thank you. I think the top priority in Mason County is having some kind of shared vision of where we want to go in the future. I think that we don't have a direction that we can agree on, and when we don't have a direction that we can agree on, we can go in any direction, and so far we're going in several at the same time. So I think that we need a direction. I think we need a way to get to that direction, and I think a way to do that is what I call a partnership for progress. We have a lot of very good people in this county, people in county government, people who work for the county and the services, We have great teachers all over the county. We have chambers of commerce that are dedicated to trying to improve the situation. But all of those organizations are working in parallel. They're not working together. And what I'd like to do is create a partnership for progress that brings the educators and the business people and the services together, commonly identifies problems, agrees on a direction, and move forward together to achieve that direction. Thanks.
Doug.
Well, as far as the priorities are concerned, one of the biggest ones, I think, is probably the Belfair bypass. Everybody in this room, I'm sure, is aware of what's going on there. Another issue that's heavy in the county is financing. Everybody's fighting. We've got each individual department is begging for money. It's got to be controlled in some way, and the only way I see to control that is to bring back the financial clerk. And I don't know that that's going to happen, but I think we should try it. Thank you.
And Travis.
I'm back. All right. I believe that we all have to ask ourselves, what is the role of government? All right. And when we ask ourselves that, we'll find out exactly what government should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. Essential government services like public safety are some of the first things we need to properly fund. All right. We've had a lot of crime, a lot of drugs. We need to get the sheriff's department properly funded again so that they can perform their mission to protect all of us, the whole public. So when you're talking about essential government services, do they benefit all of the taxpayers? Do they benefit all of us? Now let me give you an example. We have raised taxes a minuscule amount on all of us in Mason County to provide for mental health. Now, this isn't just mental health. This is drug rehabilitation, okay? And that might sound nice, but the reality is that it's a moral hazard. Basically, what happens is when a drug dealer or a drug user thinks about, oh, I think I might use drugs. Well, then they say, oh, well, government will take care of me. It's going to be okay because they have mental rehabilitation or mental health. It's not. And guess what? We have to stop tricking the voters like that. We have to stop tricking the taxpayers. It's not working. We spent a lot of money on it. We could have used that money on the sheriff's department. Thank you.
Okay, stay there.
Okay.
Because we have one more question for you. How do you balance economic growth with environmental responsibility?
Well, that's kind of a two-part for me. I'm a big believer in the free market. So, and I kind of touched on this earlier. Central planning doesn't work. And when government central plans, it gets bigger and it never works. All right? Businesses need to come in on their own account. We need to reduce the amount of regulations, make the regulatory environment predictable, and businesses, not government, creates jobs. Businesses will come in and create jobs. All right? And as far as protecting the environment, that's all. There's three ways Robert Coe said in the 90s. He won an award for this, by the way, that you can protect the environment. One is enforcement, two is regulation, and three is property rights. Now, I've already said before I'm a big believer in property rights. If we all respect each other's property rights, I can't pollute your property and you can't pollute mine. I would have a lawsuit against you. This is how you responsibly protect the environment. Enforcement doesn't work. We don't have the money to do it, and we don't have the manpower, and regulation doesn't work either because it's killing our businesses. And this is a big reason why we're fighting the GMA right now. Everyone wants to tinker with it. I want to throw it away. I'm going to work with the legislature to throw it away because guess who should be regulating how our own growth? The county should be regulating their own growth, not the state. King County can regulate its own growth with its cities, and Mason County with its rural communities can regulate its own growth. Thank you.
Okay, Doug. love to say that again. How do you balance economic growth with environmental responsibility?
Well, the economic growth is going to come around by working together with everybody as far as economic development, Mason Chamber, both chambers, Sheldon and here. The environmental issues are going to come about due to the fact that there are rules and regulations that have to be applied. That's the best of that.
Denny.
Economic development and environmental protection, more
Yes,
or
sir.
less. Okay. I mentioned earlier that I thought we needed a partnership for progress in Mason County. Such a partnership would incorporate growth and protection of the environment. I think that we're all aware and we all respect the fact that Mason County is really an environmental paradise. There are very few places on the planet as pristine as this place can be. We need to protect it. We need to utilize our resources responsibly. But I think we also need to think about how can we grow our economy in ways that maintain our environment. I believe that we need small business, as has been mentioned by some of the earlier speakers. We have a program that started at the Port of Allen, hosted by the Port of Allen. It's called Washington Cash. It's developing small business skills. Those are the kinds of skills that are going to be important to Mason County. I believe that WorkSource efforts, the efforts of people that are working on Washington Cash, efforts of the Chambers of Commerce and so on, all those hands together would, one, grow the economy, and two, at the same time, help protect our environment.
And Randy.
It's actually a pretty tough question, because anytime you have any type of growth, it is going to affect your environment. There's just no way around it. Now, obviously, we have a few tools we already use, such as tax incentives for not touching your ground. We have some other things such as land trusts, where you can actually sell your land to certain organizations who will keep it in trust and protect it and take care of it. One of the first things that we have to do if we want to have good economic growth and protect the environment is open up the areas that are supposed to be for economic growth. Belfair has been under a moratorium since 2009. You have not been able to build, subdivide, or do anything here in the Belfair UGA since 2009. Everybody that's had to build outside of the UGA. How much sense does that make? They create the UGA in order to protect the environment and have people build here, and then they tell you can't build here. Well, if we can open up our UGAs, allow for responsible building here, we are going to automatically protect our environment. I believe that's how you do it, but you've still got to make an effort to get it done. Just because you think this, somebody's still got to stand up to ecology and explain to them, this is what we want, this is what's got to happen in order to protect our environment.
Okay, Randy, you have 60 seconds to sum.
Okay. I looked at the videos that we just had on Mason Web TV, and I want to thank them for covering this. On these videos, there was something that I was very much surprised at. I was surprised at some of the things that everybody talked about. They talked about education. They talked about widening or creating a highway from Belfair to Shelton that's 3 lanes or so. They talked about changing the Growth Management Act. They've talked about a lot of things except for some of the things that need to be done. You've got to know this position. You've got to know this community if you want to represent them. We have not had somebody from Belfair for 30 years. If you want to have somebody that's going to represent it, hopefully they're going to be somebody who actually understands what's going on. How many people here know that that state highway is a state job? Please raise your hand if you know that the state runs the state highways. Okay? Do you know that education is federal and state? If you do, raise your hand. Well, you know what? You should have been the ones running for county commissioner because you know more than some of the ones that are up here now.
Denny.
I don't have all the answers, but I am a good listener. And if I'm elected to this post, you'll find that there are a pair of ears that are ready to listen to hear what you have to say about what you think we should be doing in this county. So you can count on me to be paying attention to what your interests are. I may not agree with you, but I want to hear what you have to say, and together we can come to a position that we can both be satisfied with. I think that we have a great future ahead of us in Mason County, and I think the experience that I've gained by working with other cultures in other places is something that will really benefit this county, and I hope to have a chance to serve you.
Okay, Doug.
Well, as I said before, I think I know Mason County. I think I know the job that I've put in for. I don't think some of the other people do. They don't realize the rules and regulations that govern being a commissioner. They don't realize the people that they have to talk to as far as the briefings and everything else that goes with it. I think that this is a job that I can do, and I think I can do it because I know Mason County. Thank you.
And Travis?
I know Randy wasn't talking about me because I rose my hand. I just want to remind everyone I'm a new candidate. My name is Travis Couture from Belfair. Sorry, I didn't live here my whole life, but I did grow up in a rural community in North Dakota, and I do know what being in a rural community is like, where one day, long ago, you could leave your doors unlocked, your neighbors could borrow your things, and you didn't question, but now it's not that way anymore. Big government is not the answer, it's the problem. Now, a person that was a Democrat and a Republican said that. His name was Ronald Reagan, and I thought he was a pretty good president. All right. And just remember, I want to protect your property rights. I'm not ever going to raise taxes on you. I think that if we cut a lot of spending from the budget, it's there. We could stop some of the over-accession of property taxes, and I appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'd like to thank everybody that participated in tonight's forum. Thank you all, the candidates. And thank you to the North Mason Community Voice, the North Mason Chamber, Mason Web TV, MasonWebTV.com. You'll be able to see this replayed if you'd like to go to the website for sponsoring and planning the event. And this ends the Belfair Primary Candidates Forum. And if you're not registered to vote, see Karen Herr right here and sign up. And we have a lot of time for folks to socialize. There's a lot of great information.
And that is your Candidates Forum here from Hawkins Middle School in Belfair. Again, you had 3 of the 7 running for 6th District U.S. Congressman, the seat currently held by Norm Dix. The 35th District position number 2 state representative candidates, all 4 of them, and the 4 running for Mason County Commissioner District number 1. I'm Diedrich Allen. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll have this online by tomorrow for viewing. Thanks for checking us out.